check this out. We've been exploring past moments from history. Welcome to another episode where we dive into a past moment. We aren't just going to learn about the moment itself, but what was happening in the world around it that led to the moment. Plus, we're going to explore the many events and people who played a role that led up to the past moment. If you're tuning in for the first time, be sure to catch up on our episodes featuring past moments like D-Day, Juneteenth, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the 1969 moon landing.
Where should we begin?
Today's past moment is the French Revolution. Have you ever heard of it before?
I got nothing.
That's okay. The French Revolution lasted from 1789 to 1799 and was a period of massive change in France.
What happened?
As usual with history, Cece, a lot of things. In 1788, the winter in France was super cold, and it caused something called a famine, which is where there's lack of food, which led the people in France to become starving because there wasn't enough food, especially the peasants or the poorer people. There were rising food prices in Paris, and those even brought something called bread riots, where people got really angry.
That was a long time ago.
It was, but a lot happened back in the 1700s. The King and Queen of France were spending lots of money on wars and parties, and by 1789, France was broke. The nobles refused to pay any more taxes, and the peasants just didn't have any more money.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it was a recipe for something big to happen, but even more led to this past moment. Should we dive in?
Let's get into it.
All right.
Welcome to Check This Out, podcast for kids.
And they're grown-ups, where we explore people, places, ponderings, and past moments from history that shape the world around us. My name is Amy Contreras.
And I'm Cece.
Today's past moment is a big one, so fair warning, we aren't going to be able to go crazy deep into it, but we will focus on the past moment that was the spark of the French Revolution of 1789. I say it like that because there have actually been quite a few French revolutions.
How many were there?
Well, in the 18th and 19th centuries, which is the period from 1700 to 1899, there were three major French revolutions. The one we're talking about today happened in 1789, but the other two took place in 1830 and 1848.
Wow!
Yeah, the French love a good revolution. The French Revolution of 1789 is the one that people probably learn about and talk about the most in the United States because it came right after the end of the American Revolution and the War for Independence from Britain.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, we talked about the American Revolution in a bunch of past episodes. Many of our episodes on presidents like George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson discuss the American Revolution. And the French Revolution has some connections to the American Revolution.
How, Mama?
Well, Cece, do you remember that the French helped the American colonies fight against the British?
Yeah!
During the American Revolution, France provided important military and financial support to the colonies to help their fight against the British. France provided a lot of money, around $250 million in today's dollars, to support the colonies, but that wasn't all. France sent about 12,000 soldiers and sailors to help the Americans fight. Plus, France supplied weapons, supplies, and other resources. Their support really helped the colonial fight for independence in the United States.
Why does that matter?
Great question. If you remember, I mentioned that by the late 1700s, France was having money problems, like a lot of money problems. All those money and resources that France had provided to the colonies was now gone when they really needed it the most.
That makes a lot of sense.
So you've already heard me talk a little bit about how France was low on money and food, but let's dive further into this past moment from history.
Check this out.
The French Revolution of 1789 was driven by a bunch of issues, and it lasted a long time, 10 years to be exact. There isn't just one thing that set it off. There were social, economic, and political factors that caused the revolution. A lot of these issues came from hundreds of years of inequality and ongoing financial challenges.
Like what, Mama?
Well, at the time, French society was divided into three groups, and these groups were called estates.
What were they?
The first estate was the clergy. The clergy are religious people like priests. The second estate was the nobility. These are people like dukes and duchesses and lords and ladies. The third estate was the commoners. Do you want to guess which of these three estates was the biggest group?
I don't know.
The commoners were definitely the biggest number, by a lot. The third estate, or the commoners, were the vast majority of the population of France. The commoners were getting taxed a lot, and they didn't have much political power to fight against the taxes, which obviously made them unhappy. This social structure of the three estates created resentment or anger against the nobility, the clergy, and royalty. It basically just means that the commoners were really, really unhappy with the folks in the richer estates.
I get that.
Yeah, and the other two estates of the clergy and the nobility wouldn't let the third estate vote to their full power. This made the commoners even angrier. In the third estate, there was a new group around the time of the revolution called the bourgeois, and this was part of the commoner group that wanted greater political influence and economic opportunities.
What does that word mean?
Bourgeois? Think of it like the middle class. These were a group of the commoners who had more money than the rest of the third estate, or that commoner group. They were well educated and often lived in nicer cities or homes. People in the bourgeois didn't do hard labor like farming. They made money from investments or owning businesses.
Good to know.
So now that you know about the three groups and the power struggles they were having around the time of the French Revolution, it's time to meet the king and his famous wife who were in charge of the country when the French Revolution started.
Well, hello. Nice to meet you.
King Louis XVI and his wife Queen Marie Antoinette were in charge of France leading up to the French Revolution, and they were the last king and queen of France.
Why, Mama?
Well, Cece, when a country has a king and a queen, that style of government is called a monarchy. The monarchy was destroyed during the French Revolution, which means that after the revolution, there was never a king or queen in France again.
Ooh!
Yeah, so here's some more on King Louis and Queen Marie Antoinette.
Check this out.
King Louis XVI was king of France during the French Revolution, and he was in charge of the country. King Louis and his wife liked to spend money and had lots of fancy parties and clothes. They also participated in some wars that cost a lot of money. Many commoners in the Third Estate didn't like them because they felt really out of touch with the lives of the people in France who were by and large poor and hungry. People in the Third Estate, or those commoners, thought that the king and queen were unfair and weren't listening to the common people's problems.
That would be frustrating.
In 1792, the revolution really kicked up, and King Louis XVI was put on trial for being a bad king. Ultimately, he was found guilty, and he was killed by the guillotine in January of 1793.
What was that?
The guillotine is a machine that chops off your head.
Ew, gross.
Marie Antoinette, who was the queen, was also put on trial and sentenced to death. She was executed in October of 1793. Their executions marked a big turning point in the revolution, showing that France was no longer ruled by a king or queen. But we've skipped ahead.
Let's start at the beginning.
I'll keep it pretty simple. The reasons behind the French Revolution had been building for years. Lack of food, lack of money, lack of power, all created reasons for the commoners to rise up against the king and queen and the nobles. They wanted a government where everyone had a voice. The French Revolution officially began with the storming of a famous prison called the Bastille in Paris.
Tell me everything!
On June 17, 1789, King Louis XVI denied a petition for a one-man, one-vote policy for the estates. This would have given the commoners a lot more power than they had before. When he said no to this, the commoners got angry and formed their own government called the National Assembly.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, when the commoners did that, it made King Louis angry. So Louis XVI ordered his army to break apart this new government of the National Assembly. The commoners knew they couldn't stand up to the army without weapons. So on July 14th, 1789, a mob, or a big angry group of people, stormed the Bastille prison in Paris looking for arms and weapons to protect themselves from the king's army.
What?
Yeah, France still celebrates Bastille Day on July 14th. The storming of the Bastille officially kicked off the French Revolution in 1789. After the commoners took the Bastille and the weapons, the National Assembly, which was the new government, created the Declaration of the Rights of Man. This is kind of like our Declaration of Independence in the United States and Bill of Rights. The French rights of man guaranteed all French citizens things like freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, as well as a representative government and equality before the law.
That is cool.
Yeah, very similar to the United States and the American Revolution, many of the ideas were in the French Revolution as well. And a lot happened during the French Revolution. But another big moment to know about is something called the Reign of Terror.
That is intense.
On September 5th, 1793, which was a couple years after the storming of the Bastille and after King Louis was executed, Maximilien Robespierre began what was called the Reign of Terror. This happened because there was an invasion of France by another country. And the Reign of Terror was a very scary time during the French Revolution, when many people were called being enemies of the revolution. Anyone who was an enemy of the revolution was arrested and executed, often by that crazy head chopping off machine, the guillotine. The Reign of Terror lasted from 1793 to 1794. Thousands of so-called enemies of the revolution were killed. Eventually, the guy behind it, Robespierre, was captured and beheaded, and the Reign of Terror came to an end.
My mind is blown.
The French Revolution lasted about 10 years, from 1789 to 1799. It was a period of major change in France. Just some things that happened during the Revolution were the collapse of the monarchy and the establishment of the First French Republic.
I can't believe that happened.
The French Revolution ended with a new leader named Napoleon Bonaparte taking charge of France and the start of the Napoleonic era. We'll talk about Napoleon in a future episode of the podcast, but a lot kept changing in France even after this initial revolution. The Revolution of 1789 completely changed France and ultimately had a big impact on Europe overall.
We talked about a lot.
We sure did, Cece. Should we wrap up with a little quiz to see what you remember?
Let's see what you got.
Great, let's dive in.
Question number 1.
Who was the French king that ruled during the time of the French Revolution? A. Napoleon Bonaparte. B. Louis XVI. C. And Robert Jacques Turgot.
B.
If you said B, you're right. King Louis XVI was the king during the French Revolution, and he was married to Marie Antoinette.
Question number 2.
The estates consisted of how many different estates? A. 1 estate. B. 2 estates. C. 3 estates.
If you pick C, that was a super duper good choice.
There were 3 estates.
Question number 3.
On July 14th, 1789, French revolutionaries stormed and captured what famous prison? A. Alcatraz. B. Scotland Yard. C. The Bastille.
C.
If you said C, you got it. The Bastille in Paris was the official kickoff of the French Revolution of 1789.
Question number 4.
How was King Louis put to death? A. The guillotine. B. Hanging. C. Tickling. I hope you didn't pick C, because the correct answer is A. The guillotine, that crazy machine that chops off your head.
Question number 5.
The Reign of Terror was controlled by who? A. Maximilien Robespierre. B. The Committee of Public Safety. C. Jacques-Pierre Brissot. If you said A, you got it. Maximilien Robespierre was the man behind the Reign of Terror. Last question. At the end of the French Revolution, who became the new leader of France? Was it A. Jacques Hébert, B. Louis de Saint-Just, or C. Napoleon Bonaparte? If you said C, Napoleon Bonaparte, great work. Good listening.
Great work, everyone.
If you listen to our podcast regularly, you know we don't just like talking about people, places, and past moments from history.
We also love to rhyme.
We wrote you a poem about the French Revolution of 1789. In 1789, a revolution unfurled. The Bastille stormed a brave new world. Commoners rose with cries of liberty anew, a nation's voice breaking through. King Louis and Marie Antoinette's reign, full of riches in spite of the people's pain. The Reign of Terror was dark and grim, heads falling fast, hopes growing dim. Robespierre's decree and Terror's hand swept through France across the land. From chaos rose a figure bold, Napoleon's rise a story told. From storming walls to battles won, the French Revolution was for everyone. Thanks for listening to another podcast episode of Check This Out. Here at the Check This Out podcast, we know there's a lot of information and it can be overwhelming to find accurate information online. This podcast is a tool for you to help you do something called citing your sources. As you get older and do projects for school, you'll learn that certain types of websites or information sources aren't verified or have evidence and documentation to back them up. On Check This Out, we use verified sources to build the stories you hear about. Verified sources are materials or information that have been confirmed for accuracy and credibility through an evaluation process. Our sources for this week's episode are History.com, Encyclopedia Britannica, PBS, Biography.com, the Palace of Versailles, and Purdue University.
See you next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Can't wait to see you back in the future. Thanks for listening. See you next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.